Are you a business owner looking for real advice and input? You're in the right place. From concept to launch to growth, funding, and beyond. Welcome to Startup Hustle with your hosts. One once sold a business for $150 million. The other, the author of $1 Million Bedroom. Here are your hosts of Startup Hustle, Matt DeCoursey and Matt Watson.
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. 'Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
And we're back. Another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCoursey here with Matt Watson. Hi, Matt.
What's going on, man?
You know, I was driving to work today, and I'm sitting there thinking, other than my normal thought process, which is the wheels on the bus go round and round, it's usually what's going through my head when I'm driving to work. It has nothing to do with the fact that I have a 3 and a 5-year-old. That's just where my thoughts are. And I'm hitting potholes, and I'm driving around, and I'm thinking, man, pavement is dumb.
I usually thinking about how I wish my car would drive me to work.
Yeah. And, I'm sitting here thinking, like, after the whole lifetime of building roads, like, can't we do a little better than this? And, as I'm stuck on this thought process, I get to work. I sit down in the podcast studio for yet another episode of Startup Hustle, which today is brought to you by Fullscale.io, helping you build development teams quickly and affordably. And in walks today's guest, who just happens to be a subject matter on integrated roadway technology. Isn't that amazing, the timing there?
It's amazing. So can you make my car drive me to work?
Well, hang on. We should introduce him first.
Okay, yeah.
Let's be polite. I know you're in a hurry.
I'm anxious.
I know you like to go fast, and talking about roads and cars and
Yes.
wheels on the bus is like vroom vroom for you. But with us today, we've got Tim Sylvester, who's the president and founder of Integrated Roadways. Now, for those of you listening, I like it when you're interactive. So go to integratedroadways.com so you can have some idea what we're talking about. Hello, Tim.
Hey, Matt.
Thank you for the uncanny timing. I mean,
Hey, I do my best. Timing's what I'm good at.
it's got to be. So, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, we got to be able to do better with this pavement stuff. Tell me what you guys do at Integrated Roadways, or tell us what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we upgrade roads for the next generation of vehicles. We transform them into digital networks that collect data about traffic and provide a wide variety of services for connected electric and autonomous vehicles. You don't have to have a connected electric or autonomous vehicle to make use of it, though. But the basic idea is that we had to upgrade our cable network for internet and our phone network for cellular. And so we need to upgrade our road network for the next generation of vehicles.
Boom. I'm going to just go ahead and admit, I know nothing about Smart Pavement or any of that stuff.
Well,
so,
and part of your guys is so let's back up a little bit. I mean, you've been doing this for several years now, right?
For several years, yes.
And so, if I remember from seeing before, another part of the value of this was that you designed this so that the installing the road was kind of like building Legos.
That's absolutely right, Matt. And that's really where we started, was modular roadway construction, like Lego blocks, to make roads better, faster, cheaper, easier to build, easier to maintain. And eventually we realized that is super important, but it is only a part of the problem.
Okay.
So
but you still do that part of it too?
Oh,
like It's still
absolutely.
modular designed. So in a factory, you can make the most perfect concrete in the world.
That's right.
You can bring it out and drop it down and boom, we're done.
Yeah, and we realized that factory production meant that we could sneak a lot of really cool tech into the roadway that you just couldn't do if you had the laborers there trying to put in sensors and networking stuff on the job site.
So how big are these modules? Are they 10 feet long?
Yeah, it's according to the
job.
road's dimensions, but generally speaking, we're talking about 12 feet wide by about 10 feet long.
And so what kind of sensors are you sneaking into these things?
Yeah, so we use the basic model has a fiber optic sensing cable, which measures the deformation of the road as vehicles drive across it. And that tells us exactly where all the tires are and when. So we feed that into a control center at the roadside that gives us all of the real-time traffic data.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's, no doubt.
So is traffic data the most valuable thing, or that's just one of the things that you provide?
It's just one of the things. And we're basically turning the road into a computer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back to when businesses adopted computers, they adopted them for word processors and spreadsheets, right? So this is the word processor and spreadsheet application. But as the network of improved roads grows, then all kinds of applications bloom from these basic features.
So what other kinds of cool things can you do with the pavement?
Well, I mean, other than, pulling it out and dropping it in so that you can fix potholes, so that you can actually prevent them from ever forming, or you can add in all kinds of new stuff like wireless services. Okay, 5G, are you guys familiar with 5G? It's more like Wi-Fi than it is current cellular, right? So with 5G, you only have a couple hundred feet of broadcast area, which means you need antennas literally everywhere. That is really difficult because either you're dealing with the city that charges super high permit fees to place antennas, or you're dealing with literally every property owner along the route. With Smart Pavement, you can hide the antenna in the roadway so that you have one company that you're dealing with that provides you access to an extremely large broadcast area. And most users of cellular are within 300 feet of the road.
Yeah. So when you install this type of modular pavement system, does it have like a giant channel underneath it that you can run wires and cabling or things like that? And
yeah, so you have a conduit that you need to supply all of the connectivity into the pavement slab. The pavement slab itself does not have like a long line running through them, so that when you need to fix it, you can lift out one individually and drop in a new one.
But it connects to some sort of conduit that runs next to it.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think a reasonable question at this point of the episode is, man, how the hell did you get into doing this?
Well, that's a great question, Matt. So I'm a tech nerd, right? I always have been. I started going online when I was about 7, which now no big deal. But in 1988, being a 7-year-old online was a big deal. But I also grew up in rural Cass County. And so when it was time to get a job, I couldn't join a tech startup in San Francisco or even Kansas City. So I went into what was available, which was construction. And I realized pretty quickly that construction was caught in a past age, and they needed a lot of new technologies and techniques and everything. But the construction guys were not going to be the ones to figure it out. And at the same time, the technology guys, frankly, they usually have a pretty dim view of the process of construction and, the laborer's role and things. So they needed a new attitude, somebody that could help merge these worlds.
I think that it's interesting when you look at something like a roadway, which theoretically has been around since almost the history of people.
Mm-hmm.
Like it might have not have been a roadway like we know it, but it was a path.
It was a horseway.
Yeah,
Right.
sure. And, some of the, we've had guests in here in the past, like one of them was Mobility Designed, who did a redesign of the crutch.
Right.
And we're talking to the founder and he says, well, this is something that theoretically hasn't been upgraded or improved since the Civil War.
That's right.
And like, it's kind of mind blowing because you think about it and you're like, whoa, that's right. And like their simple change was, making a crutch so it wasn't just destroying your armpit.
Right.
And you're sitting there thinking, you're like, man, this guy's right. That's 150 years. Like these are now a road as much more complex and has a lot more to consider, everything from pitch to, to what goes in it. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that some of the more used and utilitarian things on this planet sometimes don't go through the revolution that something like a phone does.
Right. Well, there's a high switching cost. There's a lot of friction. There's a lot of dependency on it. Right. But the thing is, roadways were humanity's first networks. True. And they continue to be the network that everybody relies on every single day. I mean, how did we all get here? Right. And on top of that, technology companies have a huge investment in the operation of roadways, whether they like to admit it or not. Because how does your Amazon product get to you? Where does a Tesla drive? Where do Uber and Lyft operate? Right? All of these companies are fundamentally dependent on a technology that has not significantly changed in 100 years.
Everything about our lives is dependent on the transportation.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, that's my point. Like, I mean, then the crutch was just the best example that I had, but I mean, that's really interesting. So, anytime you're dealing with public works, which is what roadway is, the things that are always going to come up is, well, the cost,
Mhm.
the cost. It's already really expensive to do this and that.
Right.
Is that one of the biggest barriers that you've had when it comes to getting integrated roadways in? Because, anyone's going to, any public works or municipalities,
Mhm.
we hardly have the budget for dumb roadways. Why make them
Exactly.
smart? And so is that something you've had to overcome, and how do you do it?
That actually led to one of our most important pivots, was the realization that agencies couldn't pay for the way they do it now, much less a much better way. So what we realized was that commercial enterprise is fundamentally dependent on access to roadways. And if we incorporated technologies that added benefit to commercial operations, we could generate market-based revenues from data and services that would not only offset the added cost, but actually pay for the entire roadway and theoretically take that entire burden off of not just the public agency, but the public in general.
I think that's that's an interesting approach.
So what's a good example of that? Like more detail?
Well, the first place is traffic data. Okay. People say, what am I going to do with traffic data? Well,
Lots of stuff.
Lots of stuff. Google and Facebook, their revenues are based almost entirely on the collection of traffic data, but it's internet traffic data, and it's a marginal cost to gather, and then they can maximize the value from it because it's all natively digital. So our first product, the traffic data collection, makes it so much easier for you to get real-time data about what's happening on the road now, as well as data about the entire history of the road since it was upgraded. And I mean, I can share some of the use cases for that, but any given roadway has literally thousands of persons and businesses that are dependent on the smooth flow of traffic.
I mean, I think from the outside looking in, there's clearly like a ton of use cases for the data, but back to that municipality option, I love the concept of essentially crowdsourcing. You look at a recent guest who's like Dynamic Logistics with Jeff Oslander being in here, and they're talking about all the shipping stuff and trying to like make it so loads are full and just different stuff, and like the connectivity issues. We had Idle Smart in here recently that has, trying to make vehicles not idle unnecessarily.
Right.
And just like so many different things. Now, is it, and once again, back to the theory of startups and the hustle that you have to go through. And I appreciate the hustle, man. Like, Cass County's rural, right?
That's right.
Okay. So, and most of our listeners actually aren't in Kansas City. So
Where are you from in Cass County?
So I went to a school called Cass Midway, which had a graduating class of 45. We did have 54 before pregnancies and dropouts.
Wow. Also from Cass County.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah, Belton.
Oh, is that where?
Nice.
Okay. Literally, okay, here's the guy who grew up in Kansas City, and I'm like, where's Cass County?
Yeah, Belton. Belton, Harrison.
But that kind of says a lot, though. I mean, on some levels, like, yeah, I get it. So,
see, Belton's where we went for fancy restaurants.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. I don't even know how to. I try to play Kansas City translator for the rest of the people listening. So let me, for those of you not in Kansas City, it's outside of wherever you're at city limits. That's how you compare it.
It's a suburb.
Drive out until everything interesting disappears.
Okay, so now I love clever entrepreneurs, and I think that it was a clever approach. You're like, hey man, I got to get a job, and then you're there, and you say, you know what? There's something we can change here now. We've spent a lot of time in the past talking about location and geographic advantages that your market might have. This isn't just Kansas City. This is wherever you're at. And we've brought up the fact that Kansas City is a bit of a hub for transportation.
That's right.
And stuff like that. Has that been helpful for you?
It has been super helpful.
And please expand on why.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the largest roadway, interstate, highway, and other infrastructure engineering and design firms exist in Kansas City. We have some of the largest by number roadway infrastructure in the nation, and Missouri in particular is, I think, number 3 in the nation for lane miles. But at the same time, we're number 47 in the nation for funding. So we're in this unique place where we have an enormous amount of talent and capability specific to this market. and yet we have an explicit problem with paying for everything that we have. So, I think really it helped bring the needs of the market to an extremely fine point. And I'm not sure we could have gotten that kind of clarity and focus somewhere else.
Yeah, and once again, for those of you that aren't from Kansas City, why is it an advantage? We're in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Like Kansas City is basically pretty much exactly in the middle.
The original
of the US.
interstate started here.
Right.
You got to be able to get from West Coast to East Coast. You got to come right through us.
Well,
That's right.
and even if you go back, to like good old cowboy
Oregon
times,
Trail.
well, we have Westport here,
Mm-hmm.
and Westport was literally the port that
Yeah.
you would stop at before your covered wagon went
Exactly.
went
The
towards
Oregon Trail.
all the directions.
The Oregon Trail.
And
is here.
speaking of Oregon Trail and technology, we need to play that game sometime.
We do.
I will probably die of diphtheria.
You probably will.
Yeah.
I'll probably drown in a river.
Now, the reason is the covered wagon. There was definitely no integrated roadways back then. So, okay. But, and my point with that was a lot of the folks that listen that have sent in feedback, and by the way, I want to give a shout out. We had, I don't even think I can say this name. Thanks, Johnny, for putting this on here and not spelling this out. Abdikim Bhutan wanted to point out that he's saying that our channel is underrated, but it says he says we're pro and to keep up the good content. I like being underrated, man.
Yeah.
Just like Kansas City.
I'd rather
like
be
Kansas City.
underrated than overrated.
Yeah. At least we're rated.
That way we can just beat expectations.
Yeah.
That's right.
So for those of you listening, once again, check out integratedroadways.com. This is really cool stuff. And, really, this is the future. And it's, much like we looked at the crutch and the Civil War, like these are the things that have to happen. I think this is cool, man. I had never really given too much thought about this. Now, one of the things that comes up, and I don't know if this is something you do or something else, but what about some of these roads that are like collecting solar power or stuff like that? Is that something you guys take a look at, or?
We get that question a lot. And the way I describe it is like, we're providing essentially the computer case, right?
Okay.
If you want to add things to go in it or plug in or go on top, like absolutely we
So
can do
that's
that.
still a good fit.
Yeah, totally. Look, even with all of those solar roadway technologies, you still have to build a road and then put that stuff on top of it.
Okay. Interesting. Now when it comes to everything you've talked about, this sounds expensive, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, have you guys had to raise money or like do anything like that? Is there anything that you can or are comfortable talking about?
Yeah, look, we're in a difficult place for raising money, right? Like everybody knows that the Midwest is tough. It's not non-existent, but it's tough. But at the same time, it's much easier to be lean, cost efficient, and scrappy here because cost of living is just super low, right?
Well, so is hiring.
Exactly.
And different stuff, yeah. And as well as like whenever we talk to people that are on the East or the West Coast, or when I do, they immediately are fascinated and almost like obsessive about how cheap
right.
They're like, wait a minute, you don't pay $4,000 a month for 400 square feet?
Right.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people are always blown away by like what we've managed to do. So over the life of the company, we've raised about $1 million.
That's it?
We've made several $100,000 in revenue. When we closed our angel round, we actually had about half of the round matched with revenue at the time. We are constantly fundraising. We're currently in a seed round, and that's going to let us scale past. Right now, we have about 20 million in projects that we're working on now, and closing the seed round takes us to about 100 million in projects. But guys, the thing is, like, this is not small scale stuff, right?
Right.
There's, you're not selling something that's $20 or $50. We're talking about a project for us being millions of dollars. And, making, 12% on a project is enough for us to not only sustain the company, but grow the company. So there's a cash intensity here, but there's also a lot of modesty to the actual financial need for scaling, especially compared to the revenue opportunity.
Okay.
Is your model almost a little more like a licensing kind of play? Like you're not the one like building the road, you're licensing the technology and
Yeah,
that part of it?
Licensing is a big part of it. And, we're a supplier, we're a vendor. We are not the road builder or the engineering firm or what we do is bring these technologies to the table. We turn them into products, and then we help engineers and contractors design them into the project. So instead of fighting with these billion-dollar heavyweights that are not just here in Kansas City, but every state in the nation, they become essentially our big brother, put their arm around us, walk us into a job, and they say, look, we've got a contract with you with the public agency for $150 million. And we're going to add in $1 million worth of Smart Pavement. It's not going to change anything for you. All we need you to do is tell us, yes, that we can do this, and then let these guys run the system after it's in.
So is it really only that much of a difference in cost?
Well, so like, a straight unit comparison, we're about twice as much. Okay. But we don't go after...
I think the challenge is the change in mentality.
Right.
And you look at here's the thing is if you've ever seen a road crew or any of these folks, dude, it's really systematic. And some of the people I've known a couple people that growing up whose families were either in the asphalt or road business. Some of them are really big. And, the people that choose that career, they're basically professional roadway builders, including the laborers. They have a lot of experience with that. And you look at just business in general, trying to change the mentality or any functional item of something that's that systematic is tough, and then it just feels weird, they're like, oh, wait, this is different. So.
Well, and that's where the revenue opportunities and the financing come in to change minds. Because if you're getting something for essentially as much as you would pay anyway, or in some cases you might look at it as free, it's never actually free, but that's not the point. It makes it a lot easier for people to adapt. And when the general contractor is telling the subcontractor, you're going to include this, then they just do it because that's the way they work. And I will say a lot of times people think we've never done this before, right? Like we've never done this specific thing before. And I remind them that 100 years ago, we had this incredible emerging mobility technology that needed a serious upgrade in infrastructure to be adopted. And so we figured out, as a society, what what the consumables were. And I'm talking about the automobile here, right? So we created fuel taxes and registration fees and used all of that to pay for building out our roads. And all we're talking about now is this emerging, incredible transportation technology that needs huge investments in infrastructure. But the consumables now are data, they're wireless services, they're wireless electric vehicle charging. And so if we just, implement the same model that we did when we were originally building roadways 100 years ago, that's exactly what we're doing with integrated roadways.
That was a question I had because you mentioned wireless vehicle charging.
Yeah.
And Matt's a proud Tesla owner. And one of the things that's and I love the tech. I love I would love to. I don't drive an electric car. I don't really drive that much. I want to switch over. And I see that being more obtainable. But when I think about, so my wife's from Indianapolis, which is a 500 some mile drive from Kansas City. And if she were to drive an electric vehicle, there's range issues.
Right.
So is the possibility of charging something like a Tesla or other cars while on the roadway? Even if that's a 20 or 50 year, is that the intent? Oh,
it's a reality. These systems they exist and they're working. And you can actually get in an electric vehicle that only has a partial charge, and then drive over a wireless charge equipped interstate lane. And within 30 minutes or an hour, your vehicle is fully charged. It's a game changer because as long as you're on an upgraded roadway, you don't ever have to pull over and plug in, which means your range anxiety, instead of having 200, 300 miles, it's 200 or 300 miles off of the interstate.
Yeah. I think, you talk about, I love the Lego kit analogy. I think that's pretty cool. And before we were recording, we were all kind of gushing over how awesome Lego Voltron is. I feel as a co-host, he could really contribute a little more than just looking cool.
Yeah, he needs to talk more.
Yeah, I haven't heard a word out of him.
But I like the Lego kit analogy. And I also think it's a smart approach of not trying to take on the Titans, but partnering with them.
Mhm.
It was years ago. I was in Times Square going to a business I won't name that shared a building with Snapchat.
Mhm.
And I was talking to the company CEO, and I said, if you could give me some advice as an entrepreneur, what would it be? He said, find the people on top and ask them to pull you up. Don't try to climb the mountain by yourself, because what's easier?
Right.
And that's the perfect example right there. And that also makes a lot more sense with the capital raise situation, because why be a manufacturing company?
Exactly.
And I think because I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, man, these guys are probably buying big freaking molds and just like all of it. But then you look at materials manufacturing, and I'm sitting here thinking, man, how do they haul these around? Like,
Right.
do you have to do that? Do you have to deliver whoever's using it, do they have to deliver the blocks, or do they pour something into, like, how does it actually get
there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we always work with local businesses. There's production facilities for precast concrete all over the United States.
That's
Any
the way they
city
build
has
bridges
half
and
dozen.
other things, right?
Exactly.
It's not new.
And when we go to them and say, guys, we need you to build some rectangles with holes in it, they're like, oh yeah, I got this. It's easy.
I got this.
And by the way, once again, cool as shit, man. Like, tapping into the local anything.
Right.
And that's got to make this an easier sell.
Oh, absolutely.
Like locally, it's not like, because you're in you're in Sterling, Kansas,
Mhm.
right? Which, if you've ever been there, is small. It's like a 2-stoplight kind of town. And by the way, Josh, if you're listening, I picked your hometown. It's a good buddy of mine. Yeah, Sterling's always my example for rural Kansas. But when you're going to build something through there, in those communities, these kind of public works projects actually have a big impact on the local economy. It's
Huge
added
impact.
jobs, it's different things. And this is where people complain a lot about government and the spending or different stuff, but this is where that's kind of vital for a lot of communities. And I could see that just being a tough sell. You're like, yeah, we're not going to use the local this or that, but has that made it easier for adoption?
Absolutely, because not only are we keeping the money mostly in the community, but we're also leveraging their credibility and their relationships. We don't have to sell ourselves.
Correct.
We bring in everybody that Public Works already knows, and they're like, oh yeah, I trust these guys. I know they're going to do a good job.
That's good. I'm curious about what level of competition you have, and we don't have to get overly specific, but are you one of many, or? So
when it comes to road building, obviously there's, it's $250 billion industry.
I'm meaning
right?
more with the smart
thing. There's nobody that's really tackling it from a road first perspective, right? Like, you've got the solar road concepts, and those guys are technology first, kind of a bolt on. You've got a lot of smart infrastructure stuff that goes around the edges. And then you've also got other precast companies that'll do a prefabricated roadway. We're the only one that actually gathers all these things together so that you have the technology in the roadway using precast in a way that brings all of these benefits forward from this whole constellation of improvements.
So where are some places you have this installed today?
So the best place to go is Brighton Boulevard in Denver at 38th and Brighton. And we have a test section that is basically our development board, right? Whenever you're building new stuff, you got to program it.
Yep.
So we did a deal with Colorado DOT in Denver in 2018 to build that strip. And now we're using it to build out all of the software interfaces.
Okay.
Later this year, we're going to be doing an installation in Lenexa, Kansas, which is 5 intersections. And we're going to have 72 driving lanes upgraded with Smart Pavement.
Wow.
And then, we've got a bunch of other projects that, unfortunately, I can't really talk about right now. But coming out of this year, we're estimating that we're going to have about 100 intersections around the nation upgraded with this.
And that's part of your challenge is the amount of time it takes to get a customer, install it, all of that.
That's
like
right.
a very, very
long
long cycle.
That's not only a government sale, then it's a construction sale. And then on some of it too. So I live in Leawood, which is like probably the king of the roadways here in Kansas City, meaning like what's a pothole?
Right.
Yeah.
On the Leawood side, I mean, around my house, I'm like, dude, we really need to pave this road again? But then it's so smooth, and I'm like, oh, it is kind of nice. But with that, you have to also have the timing of having the need.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's the main
Yes.
thing is, and that
Eventually,
that's
they will need to be replaced.
well, they will eventually need to be replaced. But if we just did them, then because
Right.
you get anything he's selling is oh man, the layers of bullshit. And
Well, and the life of your product is what, 20, 30, 40, 50 years?
50 years.
Yeah.
And we prefer to call it complexity versus bullshit. It is a very complex
you can call it
sale.
complexity. I will call it bullshit because from my point, from like just a basic like external view, I find the decision making process of a lot of things that we do publicly to be really challenging because people don't usually adopt things that they don't understand.
Right.
And some of the people that understand this stuff and vote on these things in committees aren't technologists and they might not care.
Right.
So you talked about doing this project in Lenexa, and for those listening, that's like a kind of a suburb around Kansas City. So what got them to do this? Why are they excited about this?
Well, they have a rapidly growing mixed use development it's called City Center. And about 10 years ago, they gambled that the future of their city was the city center location.
Okay.
And what they're looking for is better traffic information because they have all of these new developments going up. And yet they only get data about traffic flows about every 2 to 5 years. And even when they get the data, they get about 5 days worth of data. So imagine you had a website that had millions of visitors a year and you only got 5 days worth of data every 5 years.
Tommy, this is a weird question, but I mean, couldn't they just put a camera up and accomplish the same thing?
If only it were that easy.
Not from connectivity. No, I mean, a camera's not going to charge a car down the road. It's
No,
not
but I mean, a camera
a
could
lot
track
of-
traffic.
on some of it. Yeah, I mean, doesn't Google already do that? How does Google Maps tell me if my route is clogged?
Yeah, so they measure GPS signals coming from people's phones, which is actually a really straightforward hack. There was a guy the other day that bought 100
I saw that.
smartphones. And
Put them in a red wagon.
Exactly. And that was enough.
Wait. Tell me more.
So this guy put a bunch of used smartphones in a wagon, turned on GPS, and took it to a major intersection, and all the navigation apps stopped directing traffic there because they thought there was 100 cars.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. So
Wow.
super
So
easy.
he was
hack.
doing that to prove like
To
this
prove-
isn't very accurate.
Exactly. Not only accurate, but super vulnerable.
Yeah,
right?
no. I mean, thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was so basically on the route to work, in order to get to work faster, I need to get 100 smartphones,
Right.
and bury them
Right.
next to every intersection that I want to pass.
I'll drive
through.
first ahead of
Exactly.
you and clear the way with the
I
100
appreciate.
extra.
I appreciate.
And
that.
then you can drive like a couple miles back.
You know,
Right.
speaking of things that you can't hack, is old technology like the original Mixtape the Game before we built the app, and it's time to play. Have
All
you
right.
played Mixtape before?
I have not.
You know, Tim, I really think you're going to love this. And I think that Mixtape, the app, is something that we should probably build into integrated roadways.
While we're driving down the road, we should definitely be playing.
There is
Mixtape.
nothing more beneficial. Bad advice. All right. So mixtapethegame.com. The app's available on iOS and Android. Check it out. I have pulled a card from the Mixtape deck. I'm going to read a scenario. Now I wanted to pick a vehicular related, something transportation related. Okay. I also want to point out that if you ever listen to the band Cake, at least half of their songs have some kind of vehicle or transportation reference in it. Prove me wrong. So I'm going to read a scenario. We're all going to name a song. You can't name a band. You have to name a song. And we will, hang on. Yeah. My golden cat is
he the timer now?
No, he's punching you. He's going, yeah,
okay.
You realize you're going to get a Cake song. You just tainted the pool.
Yeah,
here.
I know.
I'm going to. So, have you ever just wanted to drive really fast? What's your go-to drive fast song? And I'm going with Cake, Going the Distance. He's going the distance.
Oh man, you stole mine. I would say
That's
Fast Car by
fast.
Tracy Chapman, but that's more depressing than fast. This is a total throwback, but if you ever played the Burnout games on PlayStation 2, the track list for that was perfect.
You
for driving.
can't pick a track list from a video game, Tim. You are almost worse than Watson.
I want
who will sometimes
the
just
theme song from Pole Position.
Yeah. Wow.
No, that's not mine, but I'm just saying.
I feel like that is probably created with MIDI and like the world's first keyboard. And I feel like that my former employer, Roland, licensed that to Atari. So yeah. Do you guys have answers?
Yeah, Life is a Highway by Rascal Flatts.
Not a bad. Is that
Oh,
by
that's a good
Rascal
one.
Flatts?
Yeah.
The original? Or
Oh, maybe by Tom Cochran.
Okay, I was
Sorry.
going to say.
Yeah.
So
Tom
which are you
Cochran.
going with the Tom Cochran
Yeah.
version? Okay. That could change my vote, by the way.
Oh man,
There's no wrong answer, Tim. Just throw a song out.
Really put me on the spot here.
Or you're going to time out on Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, and you'll have to sing it.
Oh boy. Let's go with like Red Hot Chili Peppers. Probably something from Californication or
You got to pick a song, dude. You can't pick an album, and you can't pick a playlist. I probably would have voted for the theme for the track music to pole position, by the way, even though I don't have any idea what that was.
I don't either.
What's quick, Matt? Look it up. What's the name of that track? I need a pick. We're all looking at our phones here. This is just driving.
I'm getting ready to film a video to see who's going to fire the money gun, which, by the way, isn't
I was going
loaded.
to ask about that.
Yeah, you're stalling.
I am stalling.
I'm giving you 5 seconds before Tracy Chapman's your answer.
I mean, honestly, Matt, you totally put me on the spot here and my mind went blank. That's
he's going with Tracy Chapman.
oh God. I can't sing. I'm going to warn you now, I can't sing.
You don't have to.
There you go.
Now turn it off so I don't
That's
have to
my
pay
pick.
royalties on it. Thanks.
What was Excite Bike, actually? I
Oh,
thought that was
God.
mine.
Okay, we need answers.
I'm voting for Watson. I kind of want to vote for Tim for being a pioneer. You know what? I'm voting for. I'm going to let you just say all Nintendo vehicle.
I'm down with that.
Okay,
but
I vote for that. Yes.
Sure.
Because I was also born in 1981, and it's very nostalgic.
I regret to inform everyone listening that this might have been the worst example of a mixtape answer possible, and because of that, can I fire the money gun at Tim?
Yes.
I
Would you
think
let
that's
me do
fine.
that?
Yes,
Fine,
you're
yes.
more than welcome to.
I've been using the
I better
point of-
close my.
Hang
Well,
on, I've
actually,
been using the point of view. Here you go.
there you go. Oh yes, make it rain.
There you go.
I've always wanted to feel like a stripper. Hey, there's a $2 bill in here.
Wow. Thank you for making that so much better and worth it there. Yeah. All right. Well, I often wonder what the listeners answer themselves when it comes to mixtape. Guess what? If you want to find out, you can go play. There's like a group play. You can play with strangers, or maybe myself or Matt Watson. Or
You never know. It might be there.
Maybe Tim will be in there later looking.
I think I will.
Looking through the Spotify library for Atari themes. And by the way, I used to play the shit out of Excite Bike, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like,
Heck yeah.
that was, once you talk about the complexity of things. Once video games went past the A and the B button, they lost
got too
me,
much.
Man. Yeah, man. I'll tell you what, like,
Madden football is the best example of that. It's terrible.
I just got so many things, man. Like, I mean, I used to, Tecmo Bowl was pretty badass.
Yeah.
I like to picture myself as Bo Jackson in Tecmo Bowl.
I mean, who doesn't
Totally.
want to be
Yeah.
Bo
You
Jackson?
definitely
in
look like
Tecmo
him.
Bowl.
Right.
In Tecmo Bowl
Right.
as well. So I look like,
Yeah.
Matt knows football. Matt knows baseball.
Exactly.
Matt knows
That's right.
podcasting. Wow. All right. So back to what we were actually doing. I want to nerd out for a second. You are a self-admitted tech nerd. What kind of technology are you guys using with the stuff you're building? I mean, is this like true embedded, like C++ stuff? Are you doing machine learning? Like,
Yeah.
Get nerdy.
So
please, nerdy and dirty.
So our developer team actually, and this is like super nerd stuff. They start with MATLAB modeling for the data flow.
MATLAB.
And then that moves into a Jupyter notebook in order to refine the algorithms, which once we've got something that's working on the pure data stream, then we turn it into actually a C++ application. And that, so what we're getting, each fiber optic line gives us about 2.5 gigabit per second. And we need to translate that into a really minimized data set that can go into a database, right? So then
You got to process that on site.
exactly, we have an on-site server. It's a Cisco system with about a 20 terabyte SSD in it, and
Wow.
yeah, huge. And so we minimize that down to the metadata that we've derived from it. Stored in a local database. We sync it with some video of the site so that we can make sure that everything we detected is totally real. And then we upload that, we synchronize that to a cloud interface so that we can actually display the front end and the graphs and the analytics and all the pretty stuff.
And for those of you listening, there will be a quiz on everything
Right.
that Tim just mentioned. All right. So a couple questions. And like we said, I feel a new ongoing section called Nerdy and Dirty coming. Yeah. So do you use C++ because it's lightweight? And it does a lot of, it's like, just doesn't require the same kind of massive computing power for that big data, or is it because of the embedded nature of what you're doing?
Well, it's largely because of like the embedded localized nature, right? Like when we get to the point where we're doing like web enabled apps, that's when you get into things like, JavaScript and React and all that stuff. But right now it really is like hardcore data processing on the local server. And the web synchronization and interface is kind of a super light way of just displaying the data that we get from the local server.
So when you build these 72 lanes, of road and stuff in Lenexa, how many of these servers do you need?
About one per intersection.
Oh, wow. That's still a lot, though.
It is.
So you mostly just install this at an intersection?
So what we primarily do is build a stripe of smart pavement surrounding a super high traffic area. And that can be an intersection, it can be multiple intersections, it can be a ramp and junction system for interstates.
So you don't need you're not trying to do every inch of a long road, you're trying to do just segments of it.
Eventually we'll get to the point where you build the entire road with it.
Okay.
When you're doing wireless charging, when you're doing navigation for autonomous vehicles. But right now, when we're focused on data collection, it's very much location specific so that we can read the flows of traffic in and out of the area.
Are you using things like computer vision as well? You mentioned the video stuff.
Yeah, and that's
and by the way, computer vision is just something that pulls data off a video. I mean, that's the most layman way to do it.
That's
and
right.
People don't realize how complex that is because computers inherently don't see three-dimensionally.
Right.
So we've had quite a few guests. Joel Tepley from Cambrian came in and talked about computer vision with us. Davion Ross at Shot Tracker.
They also don't see the way that we do. Our eyes correct things that computers don't understand.
Well, and
that's right.
And that's where it doesn't sound at first. You're like, oh, this isn't that crazy. And then you talk about building neural networks and like crazy stuff. And I didn't realize like how complex the human brain was. Like I had a suspicion, but I didn't really realize you're talking about just that depth calculation and that kind of stuff. So are you guys flirting with fun stuff like that too?
Yeah. And it's all about the error correction of the automated counting systems, right? Like if you are feeling the weight of the vehicle, how can you be certain that there was actually a vehicle there?
Right.
So it wasn't just DeCoursey walking by.
It's exactly. So right now,
Matt Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
So right now, what we do is we get the count calculation and then compare it to stored video to make sure it's accurate. Eventually, we won't need to do that once we've proven the accuracy of the algorithm.
So you have videos. You also have the video feed of the intersections.
Yeah. So, but the video feed is aimed like at the sensor location in the roadway. So we're not getting like plates or faces or like, whose car it is or what kind of car it is. We're just confirming that every time we think we saw a signal, that there was actually a tire over the sensor.
It's interesting because it's just like literally, it reminds me of, a former place I worked and they'd say CYA, cover your ass, which was a completely different version of this. But, you're saying, hey, look, we're proving that what we're doing is accurate.
Exactly.
And by the way, when you're trying to detect me personally on the roadways, it's more about speed, not weight.
Okay.
Yeah. Cause fast. I'm talking on foot, not even in my car.
Wow.
Well, we only need 500 pounds over a 6-inch oval. So, if you can clear that hurdle, we can see you walking around.
Yeah. I move so fast. It's hard to gauge the weight
it's
anywhere.
Kind of
it's kind of like a hover kind of thing.
And he's got the football and he's making moves.
Yeah. I just carry the football because it makes me look better.
Yeah. Makes you look faster.
Never dropped it either. Never fumbled once.
Not once.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of when we had Kevin Lockett on here and you asked him in the first minute if he fumbled a lot. Yeah.
Did I ask him that?
You did.
Okay.
You did. Yeah. It's because I made a Kansas City Chiefs touchdown reference and you made a fumble reference right after that. I was like, great. Welcome to Startup Hustle. For those of you listening, once again, with us today was Tim Sylvester, the president and founder of Integrated Roadways. You can go to integratedroadways.com. If you want to check him out on Facebook, Twitter. Just go to @IntegratedRoads or @IntegratedRoadways. If you want to see how beautiful we look and confirm that our faces are in fact made for radio, then you can visit the Startup Hustle YouTube channel. If you want to watch me shoot Tim with a money gun,
You really should.
Instagram, maybe TikTok. Who knows? Who knows?
On the gram.
There might not be enough time. You never know. If you maybe we'll put Lego Voltron on there. Who knows? So we like to end episodes of Startup Hustle with what we call the Founders Freestyle, where we're just going to do a lap, and we'll let you go ahead and lead that off. And what would you like to say to the world of startup founders or anyone else in general on our way out of this episode?
Wow. I guess an overnight success is not done overnight. Right? Like everybody that you've heard of that has transformed the world has been at it for literally years before you ever knew who they were. Facebook was not Zuckerberg's first business. Uber was not Kalanick's first business, nor was Tesla Musk's first business, right? So I believe in fail fast when it comes to a specific effort. I don't believe in fail fast when it comes to an actual startup. Good startups often take a lot of time to get somewhere. And if you know what you're after is valuable, don't give up right before you hit it big just because it's tough.
Yeah.
Just got to keep making progress.
That's right.
Master Watson, what would you like to grace us with today?
Well, I think Integrated Roadways is a great example of a different kind of tech company, right? Doing a lot of high tech stuff in an area that's not very high tech. I think the biggest challenge you have is the sales cycle of this, the installation of it. All of that is forever. But it sounds like probably once they get it installed, you've got a great revenue stream that's there for a very long time, right?
Exactly.
So that's the good thing about it. But yeah, I mean, it's a great example of a just totally different kind of business. So I know you've been at this for a while, and you talk about the perseverance of it, and part of it is the long sales cycle, right? It's like, oh, it took us 2 years to get Lenexa to do this proof of concept, and then we get the next one, and it takes 2 years to do that, and then the next one. The next thing you know, you get like 1,000 people that want to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the goal, right? So it's just getting the ball rolling is the hard part. So just got to keep fighting.
And if I could chip in there, actually, the first project that we did, the proof of concept, took 2 years. Lenexa only took 6 months.
Nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
So once again, Tim, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
I found this to be fascinating. I think this is really cool. For my freestyle on the way out, there's a couple things I want to parlay off of your comment about no overnight successes. I went out a few years ago trying to prove that wrong. I talk about some of that in my book, Balance Me, where I have literally, and I'm still trying to prove this wrong. We often look at people and we're like, wow, that person's really talented, or they're really lucky, or they got discovered. When you get underneath the surface of that, you always, while some people you may find have a higher aptitude or ability to, well, I often look at guitarists because they're supercomputers in their own right in many ways. Those guys practice a ton. You look at athletes and you're like, God, this guy's got so much talent. Yeah. Do you know how much time they spent building that and developing it? They weren't an overnight success. It's years of perfection, of repetition, of thinking about it, and in many cases being obsessive / crazy about being the best at whatever it is that they do. I don't think if you don't have the drive and focus and borderline obsession with whatever it is that you're trying to do, someone else might, and they're probably going to win. Right. And it's not always a sprint. It can be a marathon. Also, I want to not only compliment you on taking advantage of or being focal around your own geographic strengths. You know, like transportation in Kansas City is a good place to start. And I want to encourage people that are listening, whether you're in Thailand or Germany, the Philippines, Australia. Do you know Australia is now the second highest listener count?
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah. Nice. So, but with that, there's a problem that needs to be solved wherever you're at. And there is something that your hometown specializes in, or your region is. It's a good place to start. I mean, it might not be, you mentioned like the Midwest, and Kansas is not sexy. It's not, man. It's not. It's fine. I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that at all. And so what can you do to work within the strengths of those or that is in your direct vicinity.
Right. Matt, there are huge problems everywhere.
Yep.
Everywhere.
Yep. Well, speaking of huge problems, I'm going to go get ready to travel to Asia.
All right.
See you next time.
See ya.